What's up, everybody, and welcome back for another EVE Online video. This one's going to be called Detection Methods and Player Avoidance. The inspiration for this video really just kind of came to me when it kind of occurred to me that a lot of new players might not understand the game mechanics that allows them to be seen in game, and also thus them being able to manipulate or play against those mechanics to avoid showing up to other players might not be something that they're capable of doing. So this video, we're going to go over the common ways that you are found or there's an indication of player presence. And by being aware of these mechanics, you can work them to your advantage to kind of stay out of sight. A lot of this stuff becomes in handy in a lot of different areas of space. So I'll explain each one and then kind of how you can use it to your benefit or how it can be used as a detriment to whatever you're trying to do. So the first detection method, and probably the most easy to understand, is what I would call PID. Now, this is a term that we use in the military. It stands for positive identification, and it's when you have physical eyes on a target. So when I apply that to EVE Online, PID would be them being on grid with you. So right now I'm here on this asteroid belt. If I'm here mining, if somebody warps to grid, then they're obviously going to see me in space and they'll be able to interact with me there. I'll also show up in overview as well. And you'll even show up in overview. Like if I'm sitting here on belt actually, and somebody warps to this belt, I will see them when they're still like 1,000 or 100,000 K out. You won't have very long, but you can see them coming for a few seconds before they even land on grid. That's an interesting thing too, is like if you ever actually warp to like a gate or even asteroid belt, sometimes the belt wouldn't show up to the last minute. Depends on latency and a lot of other things. So the overview in this situation is one of the telling signs that you're kind of there. So positive identification. If you're on grid and they're on grid, they're going to see you. Well, you can mitigate this if you see them coming on like your overview or something. If you're like that's why I like to mine like a prospect. If you can see that and you can catch that, you can actually cloak up in place as long as you have to be greater than 2,500 meters from anything in order to cloak. So I usually mine, like right now we're sitting off these rocks at about almost 6K. So if I saw somebody actually coming in from to this belt on the overview, or if I saw them on D-scan, I can know that I can just cloak up. And by the time they load, chances are by the time they load grid, they won't see where I was. And even if they do see where I was when I cloak, what they're going to try to do is probably try to approach where I was and then try to bump me out of cloak. So I use this tactic in Poshman a lot. So if I cloak up in place and I think that they saw exactly where I was on the anomaly or on grid, I'll immediately either go straight up or straight down. And what I do is I hold down Q essentially, and I go out like 15, 20K. You do one click and then you either move your mouse up or move the mouse to where the line is going down. The reason you do this is because most of the time with the covert cloak, if you cloak up and then go to a line somewhere, you're going to essentially stay on the same plane that you did cloak at. So if you're like sitting there trying to wait and figure anything out, or whatever case may be, this is a good way to, if they try to go straight for where you were at, to kind of be on a higher or lower plane than that. Doesn't help all the time, but it's kind of like more of a best practice thing. Another trick you can do too, and I do this in low sec, is if especially a low sec system that you're going to be mining a lot in, on one of the asteroid belts, go like 200K up above the belt and put a bookmark. So in a situation like this, if we saw somebody coming in, we could just cloak up in the prospect and then we could just warp straight up 200K and hang out up here and perch essentially, because we won't show up on D-scan, and if we're cloaked, we won't show up in the overview either. That way we still have positive identification on what's on grid and what's happening on the belt. So if they decide to give up and go off grid, we can just warp right back down and like turn lasers on and everything like that. You can also just warp to a safe pos, a safe bookmark that you have set up. So like way out here, you can see I have a drag in bookmark. So bonus points, if especially in low sec, this works really, really well in low sec and like places like that. If you set up a bookmark in between where you're mining and a refinery, chances are if they see you, especially if you don't have a cloak, they're going to see when you take off where you're heading, and then they're going to quickly look and be like, okay, they're going towards this cluster of things. And if they see a refinery, that's going to be their best bet. They're like, well, they're probably based out of there as a miner, so chances are they'll warp to that refinery. If you place your bookmark in between a known refinery and where you're mining, what'll happen is, let's bring up F9 here. Let's just say, for instance, like over here, this would be like our refinery location. And then let's say this is our safe. If we warp off in the direction of what a refinery is, and they suspect that we're going to a refinery, but we're actually going here, they will actually overshoot us. So we'll stop here, and they'll overshoot to the refinery, thinking that's where we're going. I started using this tactic because way, way back in the day when I first started playing, I had people coming on to grow with me. I was exploring low sec and doing whatever. I had people come on, grow with me. I was in a venture. And so I went to go warp to where I was based out of, which was a refinery. And I took off, managed to get off grid, and they followed me. Well, I ran out of cap. It was a big system, a really, really big system. I ran out of cap capacitor halfway to the refinery, and it just dropped out in space. And I was like, oh no, what's about to happen? And they went right over me, essentially. And most gang ships, tackle ships are going to move faster. They're going to do faster AU a second anyway. So even if you are going from the asteroid belt to the refinery and they know that's where you're going, before an orca or anything even lands on that refinery, they're going to be on undock there waiting for you. So that was like one of those times where like my capacitor running out actually saved me, because chances are if I would have made it to that refinery on undock, I would have just been bumped off of tether and then quickly space murdered and everything. So that's just another neat little trick I do in low sec sometime. Just bonus points, for that and everything. The next detection method we're going to talk about is going to be D-scan. D-scan is a very telling tool, but it also has a limitation out to 14.3 AU. That's the furthest out it can see. So where you choose to mine or rat or whatever, if you actively try to do any of your activity well beyond that 14.3 AU, you're going to be already in a better position. So for instance, looking at our location right now in this system, in high sec it's really difficult to get 14.3 AU from every single gate, just because of how many gates there are. This is more of like a null sec thing, and this is also like, that's why dead end systems are very popular with miners. These are systems that have one gate in, one gate out. That way you can go to an asteroid belt that's on the opposite side of the system, and everything on the warp, everything that can, all the gates are like beyond D-scan range. So right now we're at least 57.1 AU from every single thing except for one gate. And you can see this little green sphere right here. This indicates 14.3 AU. That's my scan range. It's maxed out. And so as you can see right here, I actually have my drag start bookmark out here beyond D-scan range outside. So if you're mining in this system and somebody comes in on any one of these gates, they're not going to immediately see you. So they're not going to immediately know that there's somebody out in that cluster of celestial objects. They're going to know you're in the system, especially if it's like null sec or low sec or high sec, because of local. But we'll talk a little bit about local later. But actively choosing to mine in a system, in an area in a system that puts you away from people coming into the system, gives you just a better chance of not being detected, essentially. So that's why I mine on this belt out here, which is really nice, because these other gates down here, if anybody comes into those, they don't see me immediately. They would have to, come into the system from this gate, and then they'd be able to see me. But then, if I see a group of gang ships come in from this gate on D-scan and I warp to my safe, I'm already out of their D-scan range if they're still on the gate. Now, in a perfect world, this bookmark could probably be way out here, and at least like 14 AU from everything. You could probably position it in a way, and that's kind of what you want to do. Is you want to kind of position your safes about 14.3 AU from anything, so that they'd have to be pretty damn close to you in order to get you on D-scan, essentially, and that's kind of best practice. And then at that point, even if you don't have a cloak, the only way that they can really get to you is if they probe scan you. D-scan is your friend. It's very telling. It can help you to see what's going on in system. It can also help tell others where you're at and everything. So be mindful of the range, and put your bookmarks or put where you're mining or doing exploration sites outside of that range. Like when I'm doing like a DED, even if I'm doing DED sites, or if I see a relic site that's like really far off D-scan, I feel a little more comfortable on those sites, because I know that if somebody comes into system and they immediately refresh their D-scan, they won't see me first. They're gonna have to do a little bit of investigative discovery in order to figure out exactly where in system I am. With that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next detection method, which is local chat. You can't do a lot with this, especially in like high sec, low sec, null sec. You're going to show up in local regardless all the time. What this really does is it motivates people to hunt for you if they don't see you on D-scan. It can just kind of prolong their involvement on like trying to locate you. Now, normally in areas like low sec and null sec and stuff, if somebody comes in, like a neutral comes in, you're either going to go to pause or you're going to go to rear tether on a structure and dock up. And in most cases, if they can't find you in system, they're going to assume that you're docked up, and then eventually they might give up or whatever. But then that can also that's also helpful to you too. That's a very good tool as well, because in those situations, if you're mining in like a low sec system and you're the only one in system, then while you're out there mining and you're checking D-scan, that there's no real surprises waiting for you. The second somebody drops into local, you go into elusive mode, as it were. And if they pop into local and you don't see them on D-scan, that means they're going to be 14.3 AU away from you. So now you can start to drill down and use that information to figure out where they're coming in at. Probe scanning is just the act of just using combat scanning probes to get your exact location in system and then warp to you. This is harder. If you're moving around, it's going to be very difficult for them to get a good scan on you. And if you're cloaked, they're just not going to maybe have a good time either with that. So normally, like any area of a space where you see combat probes, the second you see combat probes on D-scan, you could pretty much guarantee they're looking for a target. So in a normal system like this, I'd probably have multiple drag or safe bookmarks kind of set up everywhere, especially in null. I mean, null's a little bit more is different because the anomalies kind of move around. In high sec, low sec, stuff like that, you can kind of set up your mining navigation marks and your safe spots kind of all over, and you won't have to worry about changing them. But just having 3 or 4 kind of away, 14.3 AU away from the sun or away from the star, it's kind of good practice in the case that they're going to try to scan you down. And even if you don't have a covert cloak, all you would do is, if you see those combat probes and you're not able to dock for whatever reason, maybe you have a weapons timer, you can just go from one bookmark to the next and just keep moving, because once they get a signature and they try to drill down on it, you're already moved, and so they're not going to have a really good time scanning you down. And so if you are burning a weapons timer down and you don't have a pause or something, then just kind of keep bouncing around in deep space. Don't go to celestials, because they can also move around the system while they're scanning as well. There's no hindrance on their movement. So I just kind of bounce around my other safe marks until I'm able to dock. And then once I get to a safe spot that I don't see anything on D-scan, I know there's not going to be anything on D-scan around where I need to dock, then I'll go rear tether and get in. In Poshman and wormhole space, you will not. There's no local. You will not show up in local, and That's a really good thing, because if somebody comes into a wormhole system, they're not gonna get positive confirmation that there's anybody there from locals. That's one thing that you don't have to worry about working against you. You also won't be able to tell when somebody comes in system either. You and them will be heavily reliant on DScan. So if you're in a covert ops cloak and you've already scanned down all the wormholes that are in system, let's just say you're in a wormhole system, you've already kind of bookmarked and all the wormholes that you know of, you can use a scout to actually get in an area that can get potential targets to show up on DScan. That's going back to using that DScan range to your advantage, and then that can help you kind of monitor traffic. When I'm in wormhole space, especially with the prospect, I'm usually just going off of what's on DScan instead of just constantly going around the system and seeing if anybody's there. If I'm out there mining an anomaly, then I see anything pop up on DScan, I'm just going to cloak up. And in most cases in a wormhole, I'm using like an endurance. That way I can have a decent mining yield. I can have my probe scanner and I can have an improved cloak. Because in almost every situation, when I see something on DScan, I'm just going to cloak up. And with that improved cloak, you can't actually warp off. But I can do what I said before, where I'll go straight up or straight down to change my plane. You can also actually start aligning towards maybe another safe that you have, and just kind of monitor the situation, checking DScan. If you don't see anything on grid with you and something drops off of DScan, then I usually use that opportunity to drop cloak and warp to my safe. And once I get to my safe, I'll just cloak up again and kind of chill and kind of just see what the situation's like and everything. That's just kind of like the byproduct and kind of what happens when you're doing like covert kind of sneaky gameplay. Is there's a lot of times where you're going to be just kind of in elusive mode, as it were, and getting your bearings and all that stuff. There's one thing I want to cover to kind of in this video, and I almost actually completely overlooked it. But this is a tactic that you can use to actually see who's in space in like Poshman. Now, like I already said, Poshman doesn't have local, wormholes don't have local. In Poshman, you're going to be reliant on DScan, but also you're going to be using the star map. The star map has two filters that are used as detection methods. One is average pilots in space in the last 30 minutes, and the other one is average pilots docked in 30 minutes. I tried to do some research on getting more information on this tick, and there's not a whole lot of information out there. Some people believe that it updates every full hour and every half hour. Some agree that, or some say that it is once you open the filter or open the map with the filter, then it's 30 minutes from current time back, so like the past 30 minutes. I haven't really had a chance to really test this, and the reason I haven't really drilled down and tried to test this thoroughly, because I think that even if you knew, it would be very hard to use this to your advantage. So what this basically means is, like, at any given time, you are either one of two statuses. You're either in space or you're docked. And whenever anybody's looking for targets on the star map, they can automatically kind of roll over targets and see, okay, there's 8 pilots in system here, there's 16 here, there's 9 here. This is useful in Poshman because you can kind of tell how active the system is, even if you can't see anybody on DScan and you can't see anybody on local. So if you ever see me mining in Poshman and I keep opening up the star map, it's because I'm refreshing that number to see kind of how many bodies I can expect, to be flying around. And I just keep it on average pilots in space in the last 30 minutes. If they're docked, I don't really care. And also, if they're docked, then chances are they're AFK'd or they're doing something that they're going to be there for like more than 30 minutes. So in most cases, the number fluctuation on here is going to be your pilots in space that you've got to kind of worry about. But like I said, even knowing this, there's not a whole lot you can do to avoid it. But it's just nice to know it's there. And if you are doing Poshman mining, it's also a really great tool to kind of see what's going on as well too. There's also another metric too that is also widely used to find people. And I'm not going to bring the filter up right now, but it's basically NPC kills. And this is what's used to find ratters or even miners. And if you're killing rats and stuff in a system, it's going to tick up that number of NPCs killed. So that's another metric people can use to like find potential active systems that might have potential targets in them is using these star map filters and everything. Now, the NPC kill thing, I've actually utilized this in the past. I've actually leveraged this information in the past to kind of stay under the radar. A lot of what I do with that is just fly a ship that can tank rats if I'm mining. Especially like in low sec where there's like destroyer cruiser rats. If you can just tank them and not kill them, then you're not attributing to that number, which would be an indicator to somebody who's looking that there's something going on in that system. Now, the last thing I'm gonna cover is kind of a bonus thing, but it's not really a detection method, but more or less a metric that people use to find to visit sites. Like why people visit random like nullsec sites and everything like that. If you're trying to build a situation that you don't have any visitors and you can get stuff done, the agency is a very telling thing as well, especially for explorers. Anybody who's doing data relic sites are going to be using this. There are even combat anomalies, but you can't really do a whole lot about combat anomalies because there's so many of them. But what you're really trying to do here, especially in nullsec, and what I would make it a point doing is cosmic signatures are something you can control to an extent in nullsec. Whenever I would want to do like really extensive mining, I would make sure that there was no cosmic signatures in system. If one popped up, I would try to clear it. About the only thing you can't clear is like wormholes. You can roll them, but that's a little bit more of an involvement thing there. So I usually start every like mining or every ratting session with making sure there was no data relic sites or anything like that, or if there was like DD sites, I'd be running those first anyway. The reason why is because people who are looking for, especially data relic sites, are going to come here and they're going to visit systems that are going to have the most signatures, because that's going to give them the most bang for their buck, essentially. And that's why you'd get a lot of visitors. So you can kind of combat the chances of somebody just randomly popping in your nullsec system while you're doing stuff by just not giving them anything to look for. Because if you have no cosmic signatures on this list, you're not going to show up on here. So kind of a little bonus fact there and everything. But covert gameplay is one of my favorite things, and so I've got a lot of practice in player avoidance. If you're if you know how DScan works, hell, if you now, hopefully after this video, if you didn't know DScan was a thing, make sure you get it up. And you can get it in, you can actually go to your scanners down here and open up your directional scanner right there by your HUD. Put that on your UI, and I usually set it to max distance, max 14.3 IU, and then had the angle set to 360 and everything like that. Another thing you can do too is with DScan is just an incredible tool that you can use too. So this is just giving us a scan of like basically a 360 degree sphere out to max. But let's say you want to really kind of see what's going on in one particular area. We're not that close to pretty much anything, but you can bring this angle down to like 15% or even 30%, and you can scan pretty much. What you do is like hold down V and then click the celestial or the warpable that you want to like scan towards. So if we were in range of any of these right here, we could, set that to 15 degrees and we could see exactly only what's here. Actually, let's go to, I'm gonna warp 0 to the headquarters nav I have here. I want to get in range so I can better illustrate this. And this is helpful in low sec if you are really trying to see if there's anybody in certain areas. If there's nobody there, and it's good for like checking gates as well too. We're gonna bring this down even more. We're gonna bring this down to like 5 degrees. Now over here there's a moon, the third moon, or planet actually. But we're gonna hold down B and we're gonna click there, and now we are actively scanning that moon. And we can actually bring our range down because we don't want to overshoot it too much because there might be celestials behind it. So you could really drill it down if you're out of save and kind of just chilling. So we brought it down to 5 AU, 5 degrees, which is just enough to see it, and we can see exactly whatever is on that moon or planet. And then also here on 2, we can check here. So if anything shows up in this list, it's going to be over here on this moon or this planet, which is a nifty little tool. You can do the same thing with if you get a bookmark. If you actually get a bookmark that's like, let's say 12 AU or so from a gate, you can actually get to that bookmark, come down on your angle, and hold down B and click that gate and see exactly what's on that gate too. People are going to use this to find you, but you can also use this to see where other people are at. But those are detection methods and how to avoid. The more you know, the more you're able to play the system, in the opposite direction. Because like I've said before, if like you really want to learn how to be sneaky or be hard to catch or whatever, play the other side of the fence. If you're wanting to get into low sec mining or Postman mining, grab a combat ship and just go in there and attempt to catch people like mining, with probably no intention of actually killing them, but to see how they react, to see how they're using these systems to avoid you, will give you perspective on how you can avoid somebody doing it to you. But just to recap, local, that's always going to tell your location unless you're in Wormhole and Poshman. Probe scanning, if you're not cloaked and you're not moving around, they're going to grab you with combat probes. So just get out of D-scan range. Keep moving, because they can spread those combat probes out quite a bit and at least see your faint signature kind of moving around. In most cases, it's just best to cloak up and hang out at a safe or dock at a pause, take a break, whatever. And then you have the star map. Just be aware of that's a tool that people are using to find you. And just D-scan. D-scan is going to give you a lot of information. Try to be as far away from avenues of approach. Try to be as far away as you can outside of D-scan range, and it'll make you even more harder to detect. And finally, if they have on grid with you and they've got positive identification, just warp off. If you don't have a cloak, or if you have a cloak, cloak up and just always be watching those overviews and everything. But that's going to be pretty much it. Hopefully you guys learned something in this and are able to be a little bit more evasive in the future. So thank you for watching.